Yeah, okay. So, obviously, I want you to know plus, minus, plus, plus, in terms of the different kinds of interactions that are going on.
Cooperation is the same thing as mutualism, right?
What?
Cooperation is the same thing as mutualism?
Well, cooperation between the same species, mutualism between one species and another.
Okay.
Okay? So, like
Like the tree.
pollinators and the animals that pollinate them.
Okay. That would be mutualism.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're both, basically it's a quid pro quo. The pollinator gets a reward, supposedly, unless they're being deceived by like the orchid that's presenting a fake female.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So,
besides that.
yeah, that's parasitism actually. But in general, they get a reward, pollen or nectar, and then the plant, of course, gets pollination, without which they could not produce offspring.
Okay.
Okay? Okay. Now, the thing I really want you guys to concentrate on is understanding free riders. Now, there used to be, the first argument, yeah, good, I'm recording it, that's excellent.
Is that part what is disfavored about altruism, the free rider?
Well, we're gonna, I'll show you, actually, let me go to that.
I don't want to be like a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Do you want me to continue reminding you to?
Oh, yeah, no, I want you
I
to.
don't want to be a pain in the ass too.
Okay.
It's like great on the line.
Is it 15 No, it could be like 3 sentences.
Oh, yeah, okay, so, yeah, you should know something about youth sociality, what it involves, what are some of the benefits and stuff. There'll be a question on
Can I
that.
explain it back to you within a minute?
What?
Youth sociality, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Youth sociality is basically different genes for each individual. They work as a unit, and they each play a role within each other.
Okay,
It's
so,
basically like a.
Can you define it, please?
yeah. So, these are the different kinds of signals that I want you to be aware of.
You want us to know the pros and cons? Oh yeah, you do. You wrote it here.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. So, how does an ancestral signal evolve to communicate something else? A good explanation, a good example of that might be the talon thing between the eagles. Do you remember where they lock talons and do the big circle? They either do it with intruders, but they also do it as part of the courting ritual.
So is that the evolved communication then?
Sure it
The
is.
courting part? Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's communication for both. For one thing, you're trying to dominate the other one. It's a game of chicken. Who's gonna unlock first, right? And there's obviously a cost. If you don't unlock and you both go right to the ground, you might get hurt. So you can have a signal that has 2 or more meanings and functions. Let's see.
What does co-option, that other word, mean?
Okay, so co-option means you have something that evolved as an adaptation with one function and then was used subsequently for a different function. And that's called an acceptation. That's what Gould called it. So a good example is feathers. Obviously dinosaurs had feathers. They couldn't fly. Apparently feathers, and the first feathers look like they're kind of for insulation. They don't look like body feathers or flight feathers, they look like down. Okay, and then of course they were used for additional functions, including display, and then also for flight. And in each case, there were differences that, so the original feather was down, but the body feather has other structures that's kind of been added to it. And then flight feathers are asymmetric, that actually affects lift. Okay, sensory exploitation. What's that?
That is, I have it here. It's sensory, oh wait, this. Sensory. I wrote here a situation where a signaler is able to tap into a pre-existing sensitivity or bias in the perceptual system of a receiver.
Right. So,
I don't even know what that means, but okay.
well, let's think about the bats and the moths. So the bats use echolocation to catch moths. The moths, in the meantime, have evolved these ears that can actually detect bat calls. So there's a signal that without the ears they couldn't use, but they can now. And there's a number of things that then evolved in terms of evading the bat. And that included the thing where it discombobulates the muscles and they kind of just fall to the ground. So they kind of, it's a random, they get the signal from a bat that's close, they lose control of all their muscles, their flight after that is random and probably the bat can't follow them for the most part. Also, moths actually jam bat signals. So, another good example is that orchid that uses the pheromone that kind of matches the pheromone of the female, right? And gets the male to come in, and the male pollinates the flower without actually getting any benefit from it. In other words, that's you could say that's parasitism. Okay? Now,
Isn't sensory exploitation, isn't that the same thing as like co-evolving? Isn't that analogous
well,
to
in
that?
in this case, yeah, in both.
Okay.
There's coevolution going on, no doubt about it. So there's a lot of coevolution going on, either within the same group or between different species. Sometimes the coevolution is mutualistic, sometimes it's not.
Mhm.
And then in terms of deceptive communication, we've got camouflage.
Are you recording? Okay, good.
Yep. Defense. Then there's a defense against that signal exploitation, like the defense of the moths against the bat. And then, in fact, there's even counter defense in which bats come in and instead of making these loud echolocation signals, they make very quiet ones. Then there's signals that overwhelm the receiver. Think about electric fish. And the first thing that actually happens, there was just a recent paper on that. The electric fish sends out a weak signal to find out where a prey might be hiding. Okay? And then it tries to get access, kind of the prey, to get within a range. And then it actually gives a big jolt that freezes up everything, and the prey can't do anything after that except be gobbled up. And then there's more status things, like indexes and badges. And so you could say that Michael Jordan, it's not a handicap. He doesn't have to pay anything. He just has better genes and he can dunk, and most people can't like that. And so that's kind of an index. You can see right away what it is, that he's a high quality male, let's say.
Now, what is that under again? Is that,
Signal, this is communications.
right, but is it signal that overwhelms the receiver, the low cost
Badges,
Badges, okay,
Yeah.
badges of status.
yeah.
Okay.
So it says there, let's see. Where am I? Oh, I know. What am I doing? Yeah. So I probably should have said kind of an index. You have badges, and there's also kind of an index that just kind of indicates to another individual what kind of quality you have, whether it's genes or whatever. And then we talked earlier about the handicap principle. So having certain traits is costly, and the individuals that can afford those costs indicates their what is it? They indicate their condition and their fitness, let's say. So whether it's a morphological signal, so think about long tails, or it's a behavioral signal, like the push-ups by the lizard. The more they can do and the more vigorously they can do, you can't fake that. You can either do it or you can't. Oh, and then I do have indices. So indices of quality, right?
Just
Like,
showing your gene
yeah,
what you have.
yeah.
Like,
You can do something that no one else can.
would that also be like lizard doing a push-up? Would that be an indices as well?
It kind of is, yeah.
What's the hobbies and
What?
walk and ways?
The what?
What's the hobbies, walk and ways?
Where it says the hobby and other types of handicap besides phenotypics.
Oh, yeah, okay. So we talked about that. He did a lot of work with the babblers, the birds that one individual gives another food, let's say, because he can afford it. And then the stuff with the push-ups, that's a handicap. You can, well, it's more like an index, but let's say the spider that does leg drumming. And we know that leg drumming, in fact, decreases the spider's life. So there's a cost associated with it. I would imagine doing push-ups is a cost. I mean, only some individuals can do it. You can only do so many. And the leg drumming, then, you can't cheat on that. So no interlopers. Only spiders that can actually afford it. Now, they'll have a shorter life, but it also tells the female that they can do this intense leg drumming, and they're going to mate with them, because so what if they have a shorter life? They're getting higher quality genes.
So what does wealth and waste mean exactly? Is that the example of the push-ups or the leg drumming?
Yeah, so when I look at the lecture on handicaps, okay, and we go through it.
Okay.
Okay, there's a number of things on the test that involve birdsong. Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yeah. First of all, you should know a little bit about the neuroanatomy. Not exactly which things do what in the song centers, but, and I don't think, let's see, well, you know that males, this is, the heterogametic sex, unlike mammals, is actually females. So the sex chromosomes, the female has Z and W, and the male has ZZ. But doesn't really, we're not going to really deal with that, so don't worry about it. So a lack of W in male gonads produces estrogen and results in gender differences. In other words, this is the sex chromosome, right? So if you don't have a W, then you produce estrogen, and you're a female. Then,
You said if you don't have a W, you produce.
so if you're a female, or no, sorry,
No, it's opposite. You
Yeah.
produce a male.
lack of a W in male gonads produces estrogen, results in oh, okay, that's what it is. So if you don't have a W, you're male. And okay, and then, you know, I don't think there's a whole bunch in the test on experimental effects of estrogen and testosterone. So the most important part is song development. So there are, as you remember, there's learned aspects and innate aspects, right? In certain birds, there's a critical period when they have to hear song. That's the innate part. And there's a song template that is innate as well. But at the same time, they have to hear their father sing.
The tutor, right?
Yeah. If it's a female, she's just learning the song that she's going to act on later, in terms of, this is how my father did it, and you better do it the same way, right? And then the son, of course, practices, compares it to his template, practices, hears it, until it kind of crystallizes into this adult song.
So what exactly is a template? Is it something that the father is teaching him?
No, the template is you're born with it.
Template.
In other words, you have a template of what the song kind of sounds like, right? So, white-crowned sparrow has a different template than, let's say, a song sparrow,
So,
okay?
Okay.
And then, but that template alone is not enough to learn proper song. It's kind of the underlying, you're kind of preordained to learn a certain kind of song, right? Instead of any song will do. So you're constrained in terms of what kind of songs you can normally learn because of the template. And then because you hear it, you make adjustments. So the template, in a sense, evolves in the young bird because he's creating a better and better song. So it starts out with a template, and then he hears it and practice and all that. You should know the difference between open-ended and age-limited learners.
So what is, how are they favored and disfavored?
Okay, so
Where's that question?
if your, let's say your song, you're just going to sing this one song. It doesn't have to be modified later on in life. There's no sense in being an open-ended learner because all you have to do during the critical period is learn the song, and that's it. So it probably requires less brain space, let's say, or song nuclei. There's probably differences there. And then in terms of open-ended learners, like white-crowned sparrows that not all, some of them are age limited, but some travel. And there's different dialects. And so if you go to a new place with a different dialect, you need to have to learn that dialect.
So in that case, open-ended is favored.
Right, exactly.
That you can learn.
You're right.
And is it ever disfavored?
Well, if you don't,
I
for
wouldn't
example,
think
if you don't, let's say every individual in all the population sing the same song. There's gonna be some cost to being open-ended. You're gonna probably have, your brain's gonna be a little different, it's gonna be wired. Probably it'll be a little more expensive, perhaps a bigger song nuclei area. Whereas if you don't need it, then why spend the money?
Okay, so let me just clarify if I understand this. So, open-ended is favored because you can go different territories and learn new dialects,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then age-limited, I guess I missed that first part you talked about, like
Right.
favored or disfavored, so can you go over
Okay,
that again?
well, if everyone is, if there's no, let's say, different dialects, and you're open-ended, you're paying an extra amount in your brain that you don't really need. Okay, so that's that. So it's better to be age-limited because you're not gonna be changing your song later on. And then, you have to understand what critical periods are. And then you have to understand the different phases that the birds actually go through.
So the critical period is when they're born, right?
Usually from about day 10 to day 50, but it depends on the species. So probably neonates, the firstborn, they're not quite getting there yet, but but they must have a tutor. Doesn't necessarily have to be a father, but it probably will be. And they have to be able to hear themselves, right? So if I ask you a question about would a bird that was, let's say, deafened after the critical period, would that individual be able to sing good song? Okay.
Be able to sing, not sure if he's able to refine and have a good song. But
This is after the critical period, so
No,
he's,
right?
what?
So
He wouldn't?
Yeah, he would.
he would.
Yeah, so in other words, he's already gone through song acquisition, practice, all that kind of stuff.
Refine
And then he loses his hearing. He can still,
sing.
Sing whatever he's
Yeah,
doing throughout that
right,
critical period.
exactly. But if it's during or before the critical period, then of course, he'll never sing it right.
So if songs are learned, why would birds need a song?
What?
If songs are learned, why would they need
They're
a
both. This is what I've been saying.
Okay.
They're both. There's an innate part, and then there's a learned part. There are some birds that only have an innate part. They don't even have any learning at all. But age limited, with a critical period, they have a template and they have a learning component too, where they refine it. So, okay. A good example of that is cowbirds. So cowbirds, the female lays her eggs in another bird's nest. Where's the male? There's no male around that the birds can learn from, the young cowbirds, right? So they actually have an innate, fully developed song. So, and then you should really know the song acquisition phase, the song motor phase. So acquisition, they're hearing it and matching it to the template. The motor, they're practicing. scent motor, singing. So in other words, you learn it from your hearing it, and then you practice it.
So it's practicing it.
Yeah. It can depend on the social environment in terms of song learning, but I wouldn't worry about that. And then what's the advantage of being critical and being open-ended? We already kind of dealt with that, so. I don't think I have much on environmental effects on the,
That's cool.
except that I might have something, well, let's say song dialects and repertoire size. So some birds, and they're usually open-ended learners, can learn songs all their lives. And the bigger the repertoire, in terms of sexual selection and let's say mate choice, the more attractive they are. And you can see how that might have to do with inherent, let's say, genetic qualities, right? So if you're a really smart bird with big song nuclei, the other guy that doesn't have that can't sing such a varied song, and the female, of course, is going to pick. That's an honest signal. Oh, hold on a second. I don't think I have anything on song duets. Okay, and then neural mechanisms of behavior. How do nervous systems control behavior? So we have some simple mechanisms like the bat and the moth. It's a simple signal. It triggers an immediate response in the moth. And then if the moth jams, let's say the bat, that is also an immediate response. Well, it kind of discombobulates the bat.
And the stimulus would be like the approaching bat, the distance, right?
Yeah, right.
Closer
So
it gets, the more
right. So
it comes.
they can actually detect the bat from, let's say, 30 meters away, unless the bat has evolved stealth technology. And usually when it's that, they just kind of fly away from the bat because they can tell where the bat is, putting out echolocation. But when the bat starts to close distance, then the whole evasive action takes place. And that's either, that muscle thing, or it's bat jamming signals, it sends back an echolocation that sounds like a distasteful moth. So they're kind of mimicking. This is Batesian mimicry.
What did you say, the muscle? Muscle thing?
Yeah, so the bat, the echolocation, there's at the ears, there's this motor, so it's actually like a membrane, and it vibrates in response to echolocation. There's a couple of nerves that are attached to that, A1 and A2, and they fire depending on the intensity of it. And if it's only at the very intense stage when both actually fire repeatedly that it actually sends a signal directly to the muscles that connect their wings, and it basically paralyzes them. So instead of the moth being able to fly, it can end up in any direction, so it's just as likely to mislead the bat as itself, because the bat really can't, kind of look in and figure out what's gonna happen. So that's the motor thing, okay? You should know, definitely central pattern generators, so, even though you've got like innate responses, sometimes they require coordination. So think about the sea slug, and it landed near a starfish, and the starfish would have eaten it. So it landed near there, and immediately this there's a signal that's there, and there's this whole cascade of signals that make the sea slug basically swim. Okay, so there wouldn't be swimming, there wouldn't be this kind of coordination without a more complex system than if it's not like the simple system. You have to have more coordination. So there's a what is it? There's a figure in there that shows it in the lecture. Okay. And then so what's stimulus filtering? Anybody? Stimulus filtering. What does it sound like?
When it only can pick up on certain stimulus, and maybe the animal's overstimulated, so it can only pick up the ones that are necessary for survival or
Mhm.
whatever it is.
Yeah, it's actually kind of proactive. It cuts out all the other stuff that's noise in terms of what it really needs to receive. So, like the star-nosed mole,
Bless you.
it's getting other stimulus from other things, but the only thing that it's really concerned about is, let's say, capturing prey. And so the star nose is really specific for that, and any other extraneous information is kind of filtered out.
So would an example of that be a fly and a cricket and the frequency?
Yeah, so explain it.
Well, it said on one of the stuff that it's having to do with a female fly and like the cricket, the sound the cricket makes.
Oh yeah, that's right, right. And so the cricket, the fly is actually sensory exploitation, right? And the cricket needs to be basically to discern that it's the fly, okay? And so I guess the fly is making the sound. No, it just follows it in. I forget. But anyway, it's basically just to shut out anything extraneous, like the moth and the bat. Okay, you've got all this information coming in. You've probably got you're not just getting a bounce off of one moth. There are probably many, and once you focus in on one moth, you don't want to hear all the other stuff, right? That'll distract you. It's like, in terms of predators, the dilution effect. There's so many moths, you can't pick one. And that's kind of confusing for cognition, right? So basically, you have stimulus filtering. It stops you from being kind of paralyzed with too much information. And it's pretty interesting, but we have this whole mind-body thing. It turns out that our body is actually mapped on to our neocortex in the brain. You can see it with the star-nosed mole, how certain regions of the brain are tied directly to different lobes. But it turns out that an animal's body is actually overlaid. There's a map of an animal's body in the brain. It seems kind of strange, but it is. And there are certain areas, of course, that need more information and certain areas need less. And so, if you remember, there was that figure that showed kind of the areas that receive the most information, like the star-nosed mole, it's that big nose. With humans, if you remember, there was a big foot, big hand, big lips, right? So even it's a map, but it's not like a map less than necessarily scale. It's a map that corresponds to an individual's life cycle. Okay, and then animal cognition. When intelligence might be favored versus disfavored. Remember, intelligence is expensive. And then the different hypotheses for why intelligence evolved. So, for animals, let's say, have to remember where things are, they have a complex cognitive map. Or let's say they put food all over the place and they remember where they put it. Even animals that don't do that, they still have to, let's say they have a nest, they still have to remember how to get back to it, right? Why did intelligence evolve sexual selection? Perhaps females find males that are intelligent more desirable. The social intelligence, in other words, the Machiavellian. So you're surrounded by, if you remember Trivers, about deceit and trustworthiness and all that kind of stuff. If you're surrounded by individuals that are thinking ahead about how this individual might affect them, you're aware of, let's say, individuals who aren't trustworthy. Or you want to get something done, but there's certain humans that are, let's say, in the way in terms of their behavior. Let's say it's like a bureaucracy, so you have to figure out how to manipulate the individuals running that so you can actually get what you want. Problem solving, so abstract thinking. Theory of mind, that's putting yourself in another individual's shoes. It used to be thought that only humans did it, but it's apparent that the other animals do as well. Let's see here. Okay. And so this is the Machiavellian social intelligence. You're aware of the individuals around you, what you're trying to infer what their thought processes are, and how you should respond. Oh, there was also, God, there was more. I forgot to put those in. So remember there was the domestication one?
That was an article?
Yeah, where rat brains,
Neural crest cells.
what?
The neural crest cells.
Yeah, the neural crest cells, exactly.
They
And-
developed them properly.
Right.
So the animals turned out to have these domesticated traits, like they
right,
They were less fearful people.
yeah,
But then they also had expressed these other traits, like
right, there's correlated expression with other traits as well, right?
like they had round faces, floppy ears, and patches, white patches on their
Mhm.
fur.
Yeah. And the tail was, I think, was it curled? I think it was curled, yeah. Yep, exactly. And that happened with dogs and with foxes that they domesticated as well, and with rats. I'll fix that one and I'll put it up, but, so we had, I think, 7 different, discussions. We didn't do the religion one. Did you guys put in?
I did.
Okay.
Posted it, yeah.
Okay, I'll see if everybody did or not, and if they didn't, then I'll give you guys extra credit. Okay,
On that article.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Did you get that or not? Through your mind?
Putting yourself in someone else's shoes, right?
Yeah, and recognizing self versus non-self. So, the mirror experiment. Some animals look in the mirror and they see another animal, and others look in the mirror and say, oh, that's me.
My dogs, they know it's them when I do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They don't bark at it, so
Right.
they know it's them.
And then we had those different discussions, right?
Yeah, can you go over those two? But you skipped Zahavi and the whole
Oh, yeah.
social intelligence.
Okay, yeah, so Zahavi, it kind of coincided with the handicap principle, right?
Mhm.
And there's this idea that, let's say, sexual signals, but he actually showed that an animal is signaling to another animal. It doesn't have to be necessarily sexual. So it's a communication thing about individuals who are actually signaling true information that's useful to the one receiving it. So obviously, if the spider is drumming, it's telling the female that I'm a hot spider. But it also might, the spider might use it to intimidate rivals as well. Same signal, just used for a slightly different. So he kind of turned everything, all the sexual selection stuff, into basically signal theory. You should understand the hawk-dove game. We
Wait,
did.
you skipped the social intelligence one.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to go back.
Okay.
Dove game. Actually, let's see. So there was also that social gene thing where you had the guy who transplanted regular honeybees and African honeybees, and they had different genes and alleles, but their environment actually affected how genes were expressed. So gene expression isn't a on-off switch. It's you're making gene product. It's more like a dimmer, and it's a called a rheostat. More electricity, less. Same thing with genes.
That was on the first exam.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, then don't worry about that. Oh, that's probably what it is. That's why it was like that. Okay, yeah.
And the hawk and dove was in the first exam too.
The what?
The hawk and dove. It was
Yeah.
also in the first exam.
It was?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make.
So get rid of those.
Okay. But did I ask any questions on the first exam about hawk dove?
And that's probably the one that I screwed up on, because you didn't go over it. Until now.
Huh, I'll look at that. Okay, because I have a question on there about hawk dove on the
Yeah,
exam.
You asked a question on that.
Okay,
I
I'll look.
remembered it.
Okay,
And you
if
didn't
that's
go
the
over it.
case, then I'll, I have about 13 or 14, short answer. So obviously I'm gonna drop some, so that'll be one of them.
Yeah.
So we should only concentrate on Zahavi, social intelligence, the brain gene expressions,
Uh-huh.
and that's it, right? Not religion or
The brain gene expression and I guess I won't have anything on religion.
Or the Hakka.
Yeah,
Okay.
So Zahavi, social intelligence, and brain and gene, that's it. The first three.
yeah,
Yes, okay.
I think that's it, yeah.
Just three.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright. Wow.
Okay,
That took forever.
yeah, well, you guys
You're
got
still
it. And-
recording, so that's awesome.
Yeah,